You never forget the sound a newborn makes in those first minutes of life. It's raw and small and impossibly fragile, a sound that rewires your heart forever. My daughter's cry did exactly that. She arrived just after 3 a.m. in a storm that rattled the windows of Maple Ridge Community Hospital, the only medical center in our tiny Oregon town. The nurse placed her on my chest, warm and trembling, and for the first time in years, I felt the world go quiet. I named her Ella. The room smelled of antiseptic and rain. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. I was exhausted, the kind of exhaustion that feels like it drowns your bones, but I was happy. Actually happy. Which is why I didn't think twice when a pediatric nurse I didn't recognize came in 20 minutes later. She was short, with a stiff smile and a badge turned just slightly away, like she didn't want anyone reading it. "Routine check," she said. "Just taking the baby for vitals." I remember feeling a tiny sting of hesitation. I'd never seen her on the maternity ward. And she didn't look at my face, not once. But I had been in labor for 14 hours. My eyelids felt like cement. I couldn't think straight. So I let her take my daughter. No paperwork. No questions. Just trust. She wheeled Ella out the door. The hallway swallowed the sound of my baby's cry. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Then 30. By the time a different nurse came in to check my blood pressure, panic was clawing at my ribs. "Where's my daughter?" I asked. The nurse blinked, confused. "She's not with you?" That was the moment my world tilted. The nurse hurried out. Voices rose in the hallway, soft at first, then sharp. Someone paged pediatrics. Someone else yelled for the charge nurse. I forced myself out of the bed, every muscle screaming. I staggered into the corridor, gripping the wall to stay upright. People stared at me, then looked away. Everyone suddenly had somewhere else to be. Finally, the pediatric charge nurse approached, a tall woman with tight blonde hair and eyes that kept flicking toward the security cameras. The morning after they took Ella, the hospital released me, not because they believed me, but because they didn't want the liability of holding a postpartum mother without a formal psychiatric order. They tried, but they didn't have enough. I walked out of Maple Ridge Community Hospital wearing the same thin maternity gown under my coat, hair still damp from tears, legs shaking so badly I almost collapsed on the sidewalk. Every mother leaving that building carried a baby. Except me. I sat on the curb, the cold biting through my clothes, staring at the front entrance like the doors themselves were lying to me. They said I signed a refusal of care. They said I relinquished custody. They said I declined contact. All lies. All necessary pieces of a system that had done this before. Somewhere inside that building, my daughter had been rerouted through paperwork, erased from my hands and reassigned to someone else. Someone they trusted. Someone who fit whatever narrative they needed. I pulled my phone out with trembling fingers and opened my camera roll, scrolling to the last video I took before labor. My voice. Her heartbeat on the monitor. My hands on my belly. Proof she existed. Proof she was wanted. I pressed play once, then turned it off. Listening hurt too much. I forced myself to stand. The nurse who took Ella, the one with the turned-away badge, was the key. I didn't know her name, but I knew her face. Small, round jaw, hair pulled too tight, eyes that never met mine. I needed her. But the hospital wasn't stupid. They weren't going to tell me anything. So I walked around the building to the employee parking lot, a cracked asphalt square behind the ER where staff smoked during night shifts. The air smelled like cigarettes and wet pine. 2 nurses stood near the benches, talking quietly. They went silent the second they saw me. I approached anyway. "Excuse me," I said, voice still raw. "Do you know a pediatric nurse?" "We can't discuss staff," one of them snapped without turning. "She's about 5 feet tall, brown hair in a bun, badge turned." The other nurse exchanged a glance, then shook her head. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We don't know who you're talking about." That was a lie so obvious it practically steamrolled itself across the asphalt. "I'm her patient's mother," I said quietly. "She took my baby." A long, tense silence. Then one nurse exhaled and rubbed her forehead, as if she couldn't hold the truth in any longer. "There is no pediatric nurse on night shift that matches what you described." I stared at her. "What do you mean?" The family court hearing was in 4 hours. For hours until a judge, someone who had never seen my child, never heard her cry, never watched her tiny chest rise and fall, decided whether she was mine. But before I walked into that courtroom, I needed ammunition. Real evidence. Not emotion. Not instinct. Proof. The visitor logs. The charge nurse had whispered it like a secret she wasn't allowed to carry anymore. Visitor logs weren't medical records. They weren't easy to forge. They were time-stamped, backed up, and automatically synced to the state database every 24 hours. If someone unregistered entered the maternity wing last night, if someone used a visitor badge but never checked out, if someone accessed a restricted ward with credentials that didn't belong to them, it would be in the logs. And that meant the hospital had exactly 4 hours left to erase them. I wasn't giving them that chance. I walked fast, half limping, half floating, toward my car. The Oregon sky was washed out gray, rain threatening to fall but never quite committing. My breath fogged the windshield as I slid behind the wheel. I didn't drive home. I drove back to the hospital. Not to the front entrance. Not to the ER. To the side lot where staff parked for overnight shifts. If the logs were going to be wiped, it would happen inside the security office, a small room behind the loading dock where 2 guards watched a wall of monitors and pretended they were keeping order. 10 minutes later, I was there. The loading dock door was propped open with a cardboard box. I slipped inside, sticking close to the wall. The smell of industrial detergent stung my eyes. 2 delivery guys were unloading linens. Good. Noise. Distraction. I moved past them, down the narrow maintenance hallway, until I reached the corner where a red exit sign buzzed overhead. Next door on the right, security, authorized staff only. I tried the handle. Locked. Of course. But the small wired glass window in the door gave me a clean view inside. 2 guards. One older, heavy-set guy who looked like he should be retired by now. One younger guy glued to his phone. And on the desk between them, the visitor log workstation, a monitor, a scanner, a printer, and a small laminated sign. All visitors must present valid ID and receive a badge. Logs are automatically synced at midnight. Midnight. They hadn't synced yet. Last night's entries were still local, still editable, still deletable, still vulnerable. I needed those logs now. A cart rattled behind me. A woman in scrubs pushed a laundry bin down the hallway. She looked tired. She looked annoyed. She looked exactly like someone who did not want to get involved in anything. Perfect. Excuse me, I said. Do you know if security prints copies of visitor logs? She stopped, eyebrows raising. For what? I didn't blink. I need proof someone visited me last night. She squinted at me, really looked at me, and something in my face must have read broken mother, because her shoulders softened. You're from the maternity ward? Yes. She exhaled, long and slow. You're not the first person to need proof of something. I arrived at the county courthouse with rain still dripping from my hair, my hospital wristband still wrapped around my arm, and the visitor logs pressed flat against my ribs like a second heartbeat. The courthouse in Maple Ridge is small, just 3 floors and a lobby that smells like wet carpet and old coffee. But that morning, it felt like stepping into a different universe. One where every person who looked at me knew something I didn't. I approached the security check. The guard looked at my gown under my coat, then at my face, then at the stack of papers in my shaking hands. You okay, ma'am? No, I said honestly. But I'm here. He didn't ask anything else. The family courtroom was on the 2nd floor, courtroom C. When I reached the hallway, my breath caught. They were already waiting. On the bench near the door sat the hospital administrator, charcoal suit, calm expression, hands folded politely like he wasn't the man who'd ordered my daughter taken. Beside him sat a woman in a navy blazer holding a manila folder. A state-appointed social worker. My stomach twisted. The administrator stood the moment he saw me. Ms. Hayes, he said smoothly, we appreciate your willingness to attend today's emergency hearing. Where is my daughter? He blinked unfazed. The foster home she's been assigned to is outside the county. For safety. Safety. My vision went white for a second. You mean to keep me away from her? No, he said calmly. To protect her from instability. Before I could respond, the courtroom door opened. The bailiff stepped out. Case number 14 to 237, Hayes versus Child Protective Services. Parties may enter. The administrator gestured with mock courtesy. After you. I walked in. The room was small, just a few benches, a low ceiling, and a judge who looked like she'd been awake since the Nixon administration. Judge Marlene Corrigan, known for being strict, by the book, and famously cold in custody cases. She adjusted her glasses when she saw me. Miss Hayes, she said. I understand you were released from the hospital less than 12 hours ago. That's correct. You're here without counsel? I didn't have time to find any. She made a tiny sound, not pity, not sympathy, just a procedural click of disapproval. Across the aisle, the social worker opened her file. The administrator sat beside her, posture perfect. The judge nodded toward them. Let's begin. The attack came immediately. The social worker rose. Your Honor, last night Ms. Hayes signed documentation relinquishing neonatal bonding care. She refused to hold or feed the child. The hospital recorded behavioral instability. Staff filed 2 incident reports. Lies. 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 I stepped forward. I didn't sign anything. The judge raised a hand. You will have a chance to respond. The social worker continued flipping pages. Additionally, the hospital reports erratic behavior in the maternity ward, attempts to access restricted areas, and emotional outbursts that caused a safety concern. My pulse hammered. They had built an entire narrative overnight. A narrative meant to erase me. And finally, the social worker said, Ms. Hayes refused to provide the name of the father, who is not listed on the birth certificate. I felt the floor drop. I didn't refuse. There was no name to. I walked out of the courtroom like someone broke the surface of a cold lake. Voices faded behind me. My heartbeat didn't. Only one thought stayed sharp. Who is behind badge A14? I barely made it 3 steps before I heard it. Laura. A quiet voice. Shaky. Afraid to exist. I turned. At the far end of the hallway stood a woman in a gray hoodie, hood up, hands tucked inside her sleeves. She looked at me the way someone looks when they've been hiding too long. Don't be alarmed, she whispered. I had to come like this. They can't know I'm talking to you. I recognized her immediately. The nurse. The one who stared at me last night with panic in her eyes. The one who whispered, check the visitor logs. She moved closer, slowly, carefully, like the building itself had ears. I don't have much time, she said. Who are you? I asked. She took a breath that trembled. I'm the one who saw what they did to your baby. And couldn't sleep after. A chill ran through me. Badge A14, she whispered. It's not a volunteer. Not really. A code? I asked. She nodded. Yes. It's a shadow access code. Someone uses it to move newborns at night. Not often. But... Her voice cracked. This isn't the first time. My stomach tightened. How many times? Her eyes dropped. More than once. Less than 10. Enough for the hospital to know, and say nothing. I felt sick. Why? I whispered. Why take babies? She shook her head. I don't know everything. But the person with access to that badge has protection. From the top. She looked over her shoulder as if expecting someone to appear. Then she pulled something from her pocket, a folded scrap of paper. I shouldn't have this, she whispered. But I copied the access note before they wiped it. I unfolded it. A name. Short. Ordinary. But my pulse jumped the second I saw it. Who is this? I asked. She stepped backward. Don't say it out loud, she breathed. They listen. Everywhere. Always. Why are you helping me? I asked. Her eyes filled with something raw and haunted. Because my son was born in this hospital too, she whispered. And he disappeared for one night. I froze. He came back, she continued. Early morning. Same bassinet. Same blanket. But not from the unit he was taken to. And not with the same notes. Her voice shook. I asked questions. Too many. They took me off the schedule for a week. That's when I understood, if I kept pushing. She swallowed hard. I'd lose him for good. Silence pressed between us. Finally, she straightened. You need to leave the courthouse. Right now. Why? They know you printed the logs, she said. They'll try to take them. My breath hitched. Who's they? She opened her mouth, then stopped, as if the truth tasted dangerous. Administration, she whispered. Child services. A pause. And someone, above both. Her hands curled into fists. Laura, you don't understand what you've stepped into. This is bigger than one baby. Bigger than one mother. She leaned. I didn't wait to hear whose footsteps were coming for me. I grabbed the railing, turned the corner of the courthouse hallway, and walked fast, not running, not panicking, just fast enough to stay unseen. My pulse was a hammer. My breath was a blade. The nurse's warning echoed in my head. They know you printed the logs. Of course they did. The printer was in the security office. And security worked for the hospital. I reached the stairwell door, pushed it open, and descended 2 steps at a time, gripping the visitor logs under my coat so tightly the paper crumpled. On the landing between floors, I heard it. The courthouse door opening. Voices. 2 men. Check the hall. She couldn't have gone far. Their footsteps branched like hunting dogs. I pressed myself flat against the stairwell wall, heart pounding so hard I felt it in my teeth. A shadow passed the glass window in the stairwell door. Then another. They were searching floor by floor. I needed to get out. I rushed down to the ground level, pushed through the emergency exit, and stepped into the sharp Oregon wind. Rain hit my face instantly. The courthouse parking lot was almost empty, except for a dark SUV idling near the curb. I felt eyes on me. Not curiosity. Recognition. The passenger window slid down 2 inches. A man's voice, calm, professional. Miss Hayes. I didn't look. Didn't respond. Didn't slow. I walked past the SUV, pretending I didn't hear. The driver spoke this time. We need to speak with you. His tone wasn't threatening. It was worse. Polished. Official. As if he already expected obedience. I kept walking. Behind me, the SUV door opened. No sudden moves, the driver said. I froze. Not because of him, but because of what I heard next. A voice from across the parking lot. Hey, you dropped something. I turned. A teenage boy on a skateboard picked up a folded piece of paper, not mine, and held it out toward me. I moved toward him instinctively. The 2 men froze, exchanging a look they couldn't approach while a minor stood between us. The boy leaned in and whispered. Lady, 2 creeps were watching you since you walked outside. You good? I forced a nod. He lowered his voice even more. There's a side path behind the dumpsters. Cuts to the next street. Take it. He didn't wait for thanks. Just rolled away like he hadn't saved my life. I slipped behind the courthouse, rain dripping off the metal dumpsters, the alley narrow and dark. Garbage smell, wet gravel, an old chain-link fence at the end. Behind me, the SUV engine revved. They were circling. I ducked through the gap in the fence, scraping my coat, and stumbled onto an empty side street behind the building. A row of houses lined the block, quiet, dark windows, wind rattling the tree branches overhead. I kept moving. Fast. Focused. 2 blocks later, I reached a small public park, the kind with 1 swing set, 1 bench, and a bulletin board full of faded flyers. I ducked under the gazebo roof as the rain intensified. I walked through the rain like it wasn't even touching me. Every step felt automatic. Every breath sharp. There was only one name in my mind now. Dr. Andrew Marks. The man who coached my breathing during contractions. The man who smiled when Ella cried for the first time. The man who said, "You're doing great, Mom," right before she was taken. The man who disappeared at the exact window when badge A14 entered the ward. And now the only question left was simple. Why? Why would a respected attending physician move newborns in the middle of the night under a shadow access code? Why my child? I reached my car and sat behind the wheel, frozen, gripping the steering wheel with hands that didn't feel like my own. The streetlights blurred, rain streaking across the windshield like falling glass. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Again. I almost ignored it. Almost. But something in me snapped open, that sharp, Primal mother instinct that no system, no hospital, no forged paper could smother. I answered. A man's voice filled the car. Calm. Measured. Almost gentle. Miss Hayes, you need to stop. My entire body went cold. Who is this? I whispered. He didn't answer. Instead, he sighed softly, like a parent disappointed in a child. You're making this more complicated than it needs to be. My heart hammered. Where is my daughter? Another sigh. We can't discuss that. We only need you to cooperate. Cooperate. Like I was part of a protocol gone wrong. Like this was a negotiation. My grip tightened. Put her back in my arms, I said, and I'll cooperate. Silence. Then a soft chuckle, the kind meant to disarm, not comfort. You misunderstand, he said. The child is safe. Safer than you realize. My stomach twisted. Safe with who? With the people who can care for her. Ice spread through my veins. He didn't say, with the state. He didn't say, with the hospital. He didn't say, with a foster family. He said, with the people who can care for her. A private group. A network. Something off the books. I forced my voice to stay level. Who are you? A pause. Then. You know exactly who I am. And I did. Every hair on the back of my neck stood up. Dr. Marks, I whispered. He exhaled like I had finally solved the riddle. Good. Then this will be easier. I felt sick. How could you do this? I choked out. She's a newborn. She needs her mother. Yes, he said simply. She needs a mother. Something inside me broke and reformed in the same breath, grief twisting into rage so sharp it felt like clarity. You took her, I said. You stole my daughter. He didn't deny it. Instead, he said, you were emotional. Exhausted. Alone. There were concerns. We intervened. I almost dropped the phone. You forged my signatures. Silence. You staged incident reports. Silence. You used a fake nurse. Still silence. Then. You will not win this, Miss Hayes. That tone. That certainty. That arrogance. People like you never do. My jaw. Rain hammered the windshield as I drove through Maple Ridge, the wipers struggling to keep up. The town blurred past quiet houses, dark windows, empty streets. A place that looked harmless. A place where people trusted the system. A place where my daughter vanished. Dr. Marks thought he'd ended the conversation when he hung up. He didn't realize he'd just opened the door. The call was timestamped. Logged. Routed through a masked number, sure, but masked numbers still bounce off relay towers. And I knew exactly who could trace it. I pulled into a strip mall parking lot, lights buzzing overhead. Only one store still open. Maple Ridge Wireless, technical repairs. The sign flickered like a dying firefly. Inside, a lone employee sat behind the counter, hoodie up, tapping a broken phone with a spudger tool. Kid couldn't have been older than 19. He looked up when I entered, wet hair, hospital wristband, eyes that hadn't slept in 2 days. Rough night, he asked. You have no idea, I said. I placed my phone on the counter. I need a call traced. Urgently. He blinked. You mean like, for real traced? Lady, that's not exactly legal. I'm not asking for legal, I said. I'm asking for fast. He stared at me a second longer, then his expression shifted. Not fear. Recognition. You're the woman from the courthouse, he whispered. 2 guys were looking for you earlier. My blood went cold. What did they want? They didn't say, he muttered. One of them asked if anyone came in here, acting unstable. He snorted. That word always means they're lying. Smart kid. I lowered my voice. They took my newborn. That stopped him cold. No way. They forged documents. Pretended I signed them. A doctor is involved. He stared at me like he'd stepped into the middle of a movie he didn't sign up for. Then he hit a key on the keyboard. Okay. I'm in. He plugged my phone into his workstation. Lines of code scrolled across the monitor. Your last call pinged off Ridgewater Tower, he said. North side of town. Can you narrow it down? Yep. Give me 30 seconds. My heart pounded as his fingers flew across the keys. Okay. Got a relay bounce. Tower handoff. Masked number routed through 3 nodes. And. He frowned. Yeah, this is weird. What? The call didn't come from a house. He tapped the screen. It came from a facility. What kind of facility? A private residential clinic. Off-road. Expensive. Basically a fortress. I leaned over the keyboard. Maple Ridge Private Wellness Center. A gated compound. Closed to walk-ins. The kind of place rich people went to detox or disappear for a while. The kind of place a doctor could hide anything. Can you pull security info? I asked. He shook his head. Not from here. But he pulled a small device from under the counter.